Nintendo Entertainment System. Today, call for the real. New Kool-Aid coolers with 20% too.
I've been a Stephen King fan since I was in 5th grade. I'm a fanatic, in fact. So when I found out that he was going to be publishing a sequel to The Shining, I, like everybody else who's a King fan, lost my mind.
I always wondered what happened to Danny when he grew up. People ask me sometimes, and I would joke and say, well, he married Charlie McGee from Firestarter, and they had these amazing superhero kids.
Yeah. What's up, Doc? What's the bit?
One of the things that I wanted to see was a man at the end of his rope, a man for whom the alcohol wasn't working anymore.
And what's her name again, cutie?
Dan.
Dan.
He'd reached this point of hitting a bottom, total desperation.
You're gonna take.
I look at The Shining and Dr. Sleep as incredibly personal stories for King, who dealt with his own alcoholism. And it's very easy to see when you read The Shining that this is about a man who's terrified of what he could do to his family if he doesn't deal with this particular problem. And Dr. Sleep is written by a man who's recovered and who has embraced sobriety and found support in that.
All right, everybody, here we go.
Really, it's about acceptance, courage, and wisdom. You can cut everything else out.
I was a practicing drunk when I wrote The Shining. Functional, but practicing. And when I wrote Dr. Sleep, I'd been sober for a long time, and I wanted to write Dan's story from that perspective because I was considerably different in a different place from the guy who wrote The Shining. And that was one of the impelling forces behind writing the book. I felt like I had more of a global view of that particular character.
I'm thinking about my dad. He died when I was 5. This is for Jack Torrance.
As a fan, I felt for a very long time there were two visions of The Shining that seemed to be in competition within the minds and hearts of a lot of fans. The Stephen King Shining and there was the Kubrick Shining. The two were very different things.
I always felt that Kubrick's movie was chilly as the snow that surrounds the Overlook Hotel. There's a feeling of beauty that's in a snow globe. His movie ended in ice, and my book ended in fire.
One of the things that's been the biggest honor for me is to try to pull those worlds together. I saw it as an opportunity as well to go back and try to resurrect some of the things about the novel that had been changed in Kubrick's adaptation that I thought we could recover.
Mike has worked in a universe where some of the things that happened in the movie didn't happen in my book, and somehow has been able to make it work. In my book, Dick Halloran lives. Kubrick's movie, Halloran dies, and what Mike did was to bring him back as a ghost, which makes perfect sense in the context of the story.
We got to keep the scenes as they were in the book. The only difference was at the end of the scene there'd be one cut where you couldn't see him anymore.
There you are. Where did you go?
The biggest change that we made was to the third act, which in the novel takes place on the campground that used to be the site of the Overlook Hotel. And so the pitch was, let's keep the hotel alive so that we can stage that final battle in the Overlook itself. And the trade-off is, we're changing the ending of Dr. Sleep, but we're changing it to be the ending of The Shining that King never got to see made.
Mike's movie does two things. It's a fine adaptation of Dr. Sleep, but it's also a terrific sequel to Stanley Kubrick's movie, The Shining. It could have been baggage, but instead it's a dividend. It enriches, and I don't know about anybody else, how anybody's gonna feel about it, but for me, it was great to go back to the Overlook. It was great to go back.
I first saw The Shining, I was probably in 5th grade, 6th grade, saw it on VHS at a slumber party, and was utterly unprepared for it. Yep, and I was never the same. One of the most amazing things about the experience of watching Kubrick's film is how insane the Overlook Hotel is when you look at it from just the point of view of trying to figure out the layout of this building. It doesn't make any sense. It's hard to figure out where in space you are and where in time you are. It's one of the most effective and disorienting things about Kubrick's vision for the Overlook Hotel. It was really important for us to bring that back and to try to live in that same disconnection. And we love The Shining so much we want to get it right. Oh, this set's amazing, isn't it? Just breathtaking. Every time I walk in here, I'm just floored. It's like walking into your own memories.
Not in there.
It's really something.
The Kubrick estate has a long-standing relationship with Warner Brothers. They were aware and supportive of the fact that the movie was getting made.
Mark?
They've been generous with plans for the original Overlook that we adapted to our purposes.
That's the moment that you think, wow, is this real? Like, we're recreating the Overlook Hotel. And then the reality sets in of, we're having to build something in 6 weeks that Stanley Kubrick had more time to do.
We had to build some of these stages like Russian nesting dolls, and then the minute we were finished with one, we'd demolish it, sometimes too quickly.
One day of shooting. All this.
It's a very fun Tetris game to see, well, where can we put this set? And our construction department and art department have all been fantastic in making everything work.
The primary sets from The Shining that we recreated, the Colorado Lounge, the Gold Room and the Gold Room Bar, the Red Bathroom, and then we have the hallway where the twins live. We have room 237 where Mrs. Massey dwells. We have the staff apartment where, Jack Torrance hacked through the door. And then we have the hallways where little Danny Torrance rode his big wheel.
Something really special happened the first time we walked into the Overlook Hotel. I just want to do the rest of the movie in here.
Being on set feels like an event. The excitement on set is palpable. Everyone is excited to be working on it, and it's a labor of love for everybody.
I think we need to get a tennis ball.
Yeah.
We need to do a little handball in here.
Yep. We turned into kids.
Oh, hell.
And we were all, riding around on the big wheel.
Yeah!
Like, we were kids. We were riding around that set like little Danny, giggling maniacally. For as much work as we have to do on a given day, we were giddy moving through those spaces. We were giddy lining up the shots. We were giddy looking at our frame and knowing that we were going to be able to capture these images. I felt the way I did when I was a kid and I picked up a VHS camera.
Oh.
They did an amazing job of bringing this to life. Completely remarkable.
Trevor!
There's a magic space to work in. It was fantastic. You could literally imagine Jack Nicholson sitting behind the typewriter over there. It was crazy.
So this is the Atler typewriter. This is the exact model used in The Shining. It's actually a working typewriter. It's in great shape. We got really lucky. And then we had to create all the pages, of course, or for all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
It was clear to me from the beginning that there was no way to do this movie right without revisiting characters taken directly from the Kubrick universe.
It is very big shoes to fill. I think that Shelley Duvall's performance in that is the closest thing to a perfect performance in something.
It's about a continuity of character, not a continuity of actor.
Oh, hang on, Doc. I suppose as an actor I have two instincts. One is to interpret Dick as I see him, but I want to do justice to the character. And I want to do justice to Scatman Crothers' performance.
It seems to me you grew up fine, son, but you still owe a debt. Pay it.
And Roger, of course, played little Danny. He's the thing that connects The Shining and our story. Roger stepped into that role in a really effective way.
I am in love with that little boy. He is the sweetest.
Oh, well, really? What?
Literally, in between takes, he would lean over to me and be like, I love acting. And I'm like, me too.
This is one of the harder acting things to do, okay?
So what's the harder acting?
It was easier with them to see, yes, this is an actor who will remind me of the iconic performance while doing something that is their own. But there's something about Jack Nicholson in The Shining that is so iconic. It was always going to be controversial, no matter what we did. Let's get to your acts. Okay. And let's play. Yeah.
Mike Flanagan calls me and says, I have a part for you, but I understand if you don't want to do it. And he said, I want you to play Jack Torrance. I said, well, are you sure you want to cast me in that role? He said, do you want to do it? I said, yes. He said, perhaps now we should discuss what we're going to do with your hairline. I said, okay, it's all right, Mike. I'm on board.
One of the things I love about what Kubrick did is Delbert Grady, a former caretaker who murdered his kids. He appears as a waiter who seems to have no memory of what he actually did. And you think about what happens to people when they die in the Overlook Hotel. They're staff now. Now we're not even talking about someone coming in to try to play Nicholson or to play the part the way Nicholson approached it. This is a whole other expression of Jack Torrance, and it's one that abides perfectly by the rules that Kubrick set out himself.
I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I'm just a bartender.
He's Lloyd, the barman, but he's also my dad. And that was very moving. It was a nice scene to play. It surprised me as we played it. I didn't expect it to sort of take us where it did.
On the house.
Thanks, Dad. And I felt very much like that little boy from The Shining. It's like the worst thing he could imagine is what he hears his dad saying to him.
And a family, a wife, a kid. Those mouths eat time. They eat your days on Earth. They gobble them up.
But it was quite moving. I found it quite upsetting when we played it.
Are you gonna take your medicine?
I'm not.
One of the other images that we wanted to come back to was, of course, the Grady girls.
Come play with us.
The actresses that Kubrick used had a very specific look. And so for us, it was really about trying not to take any liberties with their appearances and bring it back in a way that would make me, as a fan of The Shining, go, yes.
We're wearing these blue dresses with a bow and a little rose.
Even when they made that movie, that was period fabric. So we tried to get that fabric, couldn't get it. So we ended up with our art department printing the fabric. It was kind of painstaking to do that, but it's amazing when you see it.
We're going to be coming around to that in just a couple shots. We wanted you guys to have time to practice and get ready. And those poor girls had to stand just precisely so, had to speak just so, and walk just so, and they really arrived wanting to channel that image and that feeling.
Seeing Mrs. Massey was super cool. They built an entire Miss Massey body for the actress.
The makeup takes a long time, like 5 hours to put it on, a couple of hours to take it off. And it's standing, you can't sit. But to be a part of this, I would endure pretty much anything.
Pull the curtain back with a smile, hold a beat, then stand and stop and hold a couple of beats.
All the necessary parts are covered with silicone rubber.
So she feels actually clothed, but it's more like a scuba diving suit, maybe a wetsuit, because she forgets that she sees herself and says, oh, I'm naked, but she's not.
Which led to some of the funniest moments I've ever had on a set, because Sally had absolutely no sense of nudity. So we would give her a robe, but it didn't matter, and she had no idea whether it was open or closed, so it was not uncommon to just see Mrs. Massey hanging out at Crafty, robe just wide open, without any sense of shame, because why should she? She wasn't naked. It just really looked that way.
I forget how hideous that I look. I'm walking around talking to everybody, and then I look in the mirror and I go, oh, whoa. I forgot. I am Sally.
I was like, let's see, take off the robe. Oh my God, it looks so good. I was
One of the things that was very exciting to me was that there are moments we actively flash back, almost direct recreations of moments from The Shining.
Nice and fast around the corner, nice and fast. Good, good.
And we tried very hard to do them just right, because this is one of the few times where we're directly quoting the first film.
We got to recreate that amazing tracking shot, that Steadicam shot that carries him through the hall and around the corner to 237.
This is one of the tricycles, and the trike hasn't been produced for probably the last 10, 15 years. So we got what was left, brought him in, and we recreated the trike basically from the ground up. But it came out beautiful. It's the exact bike. I mean, even with the bell, it's right down to the T on it.
Not many people get to say this on a set. We're about to shoot a scene where Jack Torrance is chasing Danny with the axe through the halls of the Overlook. Danny! Danny boy!
Once you're in all the gear and you go on set, it's pretty amazing.
All right, team, here we go. We recreated rubber axes, which looks like it's chrome. It looks like a polished chrome. This is actually a soft rubber, which looks really, really good. And then this is the Hero Metal axe. So these are the actual axes that we've been using because you can see they're bloody from running around the hallways and stuff.
All right, sir. Same as before. We can go, I think, even further on that.
We got to recreate the axe coming through the bathroom door. Alex Esso in Shelley Duvall's exact mark.
I'm very excited. I have a piece of movie memorabilia history right here. A wooden shard of the door. I think I'm gonna have everyone sign this, actually. It's gonna be like my cast or something, so.
Tail sticks, tail sticks!
The hedge maze was Stanley Kubrick's invention. In the book, there were topiaries that chased and attacked, actually, a couple of the characters. But in The Shining, the movie, he had this incredible hedge maze that he placed outside of the hotel. We thought it would be really compelling for the audience to be back in that environment. We built massive walls, you know, it's 8 feet, 9 feet tall, and filled it all with fake snow.
And we're here for a really cool confrontation scene between Rose and Abra, and that turns out to all be happening inside Dan's mind.
Roll, please, rolling. And sit, and action.
I think the challenge that I felt the most acutely was shared by everyone in our crew and everyone in the cast, which was we are continuing the cinematic language of Stanley Kubrick. We wanted to have the same Overlook Hotel. We wanted to have the same Room 237. The thing is, it's impossible to recreate those perfectly. It's just not possible. And in trying to do a perfect recreation, it becomes imitation. And what I wanted to do was homage Kubrick's work, to acknowledge it in a way that is reverent without just doing it again.
All right, I want to try to turn you around this way. Okay. And head off into this world.
In that respect, it was entirely unique and deeply stressful.
Wendy.
But also really exciting. You know, there was something really joyful about it as well.
Okay, and action.
In my book, The Shining, Danny Torrance was just learning how to read, and he was going to see this word in the mirror, and I immediately thought, well, he would see murder. What is murder backwards? And when I saw it was red rum, I thought to myself, boy, that's just perfect.
The first time I saw that word on that blackboard cracked into it on set was magical. I felt that way when I read that chapter of Dr. Sleep. It was one of the most satisfying and exciting parts of reading Dr. Sleep for me, and I felt that way on set too. And the minute we came around the corner and saw that, it was awesome. One of the first jobs I ever tried to pursue, once I was able to really pursue movies, was Dr. Sleep. I sent Steve the script as soon as I finished. I was terrified of what he was going to think. His reaction to the script was overwhelmingly positive. He said, "This is the kind of movie that is so good, they're never going to make it." And I got to respond to that by saying, actually, it was just greenlit.
Rolling, rolling.
At its core, Dr. Sleep is the continuation of the story of one of horror's most affecting and iconic characters, and that is Danny Torrance. This is the rest of his journey. This is him still out there dealing with the shining in a world that is dark and horrifying.
You ain't talking, huh, Doc?
The chance to revisit that world and this incredible character is what drew me to the project. The fact that I got to make the movie was an ultimate honor and surprise. I just wanted to see it.
Come on. Yeah, don't worry about me. Just go, go.
One of the things that I believe very much about horror cinema in general is that your genre elements are only as strong as your characters. And that's something that I learned reading Stephen King for a lifetime.
As a writer, I have ideas in my head, but I never see the character himself. There's very little physical description in my books. I don't see him because I'm behind his eyes. But when you're in the movie, you stop thinking, this is Ewan McGregor playing Danny Torrance. You think to yourself, it's Dan Torrance. He's the character that I wrote.
I'd played Dan Torrance, which is about the horror of what happened with his father and losing his father at the age of 5.
I'm thinking about my dad. He also stood in a room like this once, wanting to get well.
I felt like that little boy. Having gone through this terrible experience, how does he carry on and how does he deal with his shine?
Hi.
Hi, Abra.
One of the things that just amazed me was Abra. She's terrific.
If anyone asks, you're my uncle, Uncle Dan.
I was very nervous about finding the right Abra, and we saw almost 1,000 young actresses, and Kylie Curran rose to the top.
I'd like to welcome to the set for her first day of work, Kylie Curran.
Mike works amazing with actors. To help me prepare, he called me and Ewan in for a director's meeting, and he told us about his vision, and we're a good team, I think.
Don't chase these people.
I would start the letter writing campaign to Steve now, asking for more Abra Stone stories.
Abra, the middle years.
Abra, do you hear me? They come back.
If you had more, I'd be all over them.
It's a possibility. Would never say never.
Get out!
Rebecca, as Rose the Hat, is just amazing. She's so beautiful and so evil.
Well, hi there. You're wondering why I'm wearing such a funny hat.
And the hat is perfect.
I actually found a hat that's an original from the period that's beaver felt. It's 100 years old. It's a top hat, which is about that high. And so we basically chopped it and made it the lower sort of scale to Rebecca and added some details.
This is a great little torture. Can you see this? This one goes far in underneath children's nails, and that creates a lot of pain and torture, which basically means a lot of steam. Nothing in my hat. For me, the whole essence of Rose and the true knot, it's the primal emotions, being a part of something, sex, feeding. Only that we feed on children, we eat the steam. You are a special little thing, aren't you?
As to where the True Knot was born, where the idea came from, I drive back and forth between Florida and Maine a lot. And at a lot of the rest areas, the rec Vs are always parked together. And I thought to myself, those are full of Satan worshipers who travel across the country casting evil spells. And that gradually morphed into vampires that were living on the essence of these special kids that have some kind of paranormal power, that power could be sucked out of them.
Please, I won't tell anyone, please, let me go, please.
They'd been around for so long. The wardrobe department tried to incorporate all sorts of trinkets into their fashion. When you glance at them, they just seem kind of weird. But if you go and really scrutinize the details, you can see decades, if not centuries, of little souvenirs that they've kept.
My backstory was I used my shining for gambling. I'm probably 500 years old, but some of them, like Grandpa Flick, is thousands of years old.
We are the true knot. What is tied cannot be untied. They need each other, and they each have their own kind of specialty.
I think Crow Daddy came from the French Indian Wars. He was a tracker. Rose the Hat found him and turned him, and that's how he became so close to Rose.
Mike Flanagan gave us a lot of creative liberties where we could come up with our own ideas for our character, which is such a gift for an actor. And with Apron Annie, Moroccan times of, the 1500s is when she got picked up by Grandpa Flick. She was wearing a head wrap, and she took it off, left her life behind, and she wore it as an apron after that.
Terry, our costume designer, just wanted Silent Sari to be quite flowy. Originally, we had an idea of Joan of Arc. I've actually cut my hair quite short for the part. We wanted to have this sort of androgynous look for her with these big eyes and just, have her be quiet and always watching and always...
So it's really about kind of what you guys feel, how you want to interact with each other on this one.
If I was doing anything off the character, then Mike would step right in. But he also lets us have a lot of freedom to sort of play with how we feel these characters would be.
Mike is my brother. He gave me a call and was like, hey, do you want to come out and do the film? And this was a larger project than I'm used to working on. I was very surprised that he asked it all, and very pleased to be here.
I was working as a set medic for Mike Flanagan, and I put in for the set medic for this show, and I didn't get it, and I sent him a text saying, hey, I didn't make the position, but, thank you for the shot anyway.
Met worked with me on The Haunting of Hill House, and when I was thinking about this group, I thought it could be fun, too, to have someone who isn't an actor, and Met just ate it up.
We had this incredible movement coach called Terry Notary, who is just God to me. And we were talking about the acting of bug-like creatures, that we all have these animals within ourselves, but the way we feed, the way we move, the way we eat or communicate to each other is all based upon the inner creature.
Parlor tricks, just parlor tricks.
And it's also a creature that will display itself when we ourselves cycle.
Get out of there! Get out of there!
Which is our death.
Certainly one of the most impactful moments of the book is the murder of Bradley Trevor. It is a point of inflection in the story that is unspeakably visceral.
Hey, 19.
It's okay. We're friends.
The murder of a child was one of the hardest things I've had to read. Certainly one of the hardest things we've had to film.
Mike and I had worked with Jacob Tremblay before in a movie called Before I Wake, and with respect to Bradley Trevor, we needed someone who was going to make an impression, and there aren't many actors that age or any age who can do what Jacob Tremblay did in this movie.
I had wanted it to be a surprise when we saw, who might be the most recognizable young actor in the business show up in the film, only to then brutally kill him on screen. Jacob had been practicing on his own to do this scene, and when he finally did his first take, we at the monitor our jaws hit the floor, we couldn't look at it. The actors playing the True Knot, who had been full of swagger before the camera rolled, was like, yeah, we're gonna go kill this kid, we're the monsters. We're literally so shaken that they had to step away from the set.
I'm watching this scene, and I just feel tears.
Are you gonna hurt me?
We were shaking, and Mike comes over, he's like, great, can't use any of your expressions because you guys are supposed to be enjoying this.
And Jacob dusted himself off, high-fived his dad and went to Crafty because he was having a blast doing this.
I thought this was rated G.
We were very lucky to have Bob Kurtzman rejoin us to do the special effects makeup.
There's a scene where Rose's hand is smashed into the file cabinet drawer. It's hard to look at, but you know, it was Bob Kurtzman who designed it, who also did the degloving for us in Gerald's game, so it's old hat to us now how to mangle hands. We're getting really good at it.
We did an initial sculpt version and then tested it on Marcy's hand, and then Mike gave notes he'd wanted less. Yeah. So we ended up resculpting it, and then Rebecca really knows how to sell it, which helps us as well. She knows how to bend the finger and make it look dangly.
Mike Flanagan gets his famous destroyed hand sequence. It's an honor to have your hand savaged in a Mike Flanagan film.
Michael Fimignari, who has been the DP for nearly all of the movies Mike and I have done, is an essential element to us.
Michael and I approached this knowing that we were not only going to be paying homage and reverence to the aesthetics that Stanley Kubrick had established, but that we were also building our own new world, that we were building 3 of them, actually, that we were responsible for creating a beautiful aesthetic for Dan's world and for Abra's world and for Rose's world. And that was some of the most intense fun that we had on this.
Well, well, well. Hi there.
We're doing the finale of the movie, and this is the showdown between Rose and Danny in the Colorado Lounge. And this sequence where he has an axe, he's holding her off, he swings the axe at her, which she deflects, it hits her in the shoulder, she rips it out, winds up hooking him in the leg, and then uses the axe like a pitchfork to throw him down the stairs. Our stunt double, Stephen Atkinson, is gonna get flung down the stairs by Rebecca.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
First time ever stunt, air round, stair fall. Give it to Stephen, guys.
I've always believed that in its best expression, horror is the safe space for us to take a hard look at the darkest corners of who we are.
There it is.
And to me, it's about so much more than scaring you in a dark theater. But underneath it all, it's a catharsis that isn't about indulging these dark ideas. It's about confronting them. I think what makes it important is that we can also say, this is why it's important to stand up in the world when you see an injustice. This is why it's important to shine.
When I first met you, I told you that you should keep your shine out of sight. But I was wrong.
There can be no horror if there isn't caring and love. That's very important, and I think a lot of filmmakers miss that, and Mike doesn't. Mike understands.
Shine on, Aberstone. You shine on.